Chapter 801. Jun Fengling has returned 1. Outside the door, an elderly man stood with his arms behind his back. He appeared to be impatient from waiting, and his haughty features were furrowed in a displeased expression with a slight frown. It was a while before Yi Qi and Shui Ruer hurried over. After seeing the old man outside the door, Yi Qi suppressed the surge of emotions in her heart and slowly walked to him. The old man in front of them had the demeanor of a strong immortal, making Yi Qi believe in him without any doubts. However, Yi Qi still asked, "Can you really cure my foster mother?" The old man's brows slightly furrowed as he coldly stated, "It looks like you don't trust my abilities. If you don't trust me, then I can leave now, and it'll be like I never came. However, let me tell you, if it weren't for Ruer begging me, I wouldn't save anyone even if you offered 1,000 bottles of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, let alone 1 bottle." A skillful physician naturally had his arrogance. If the old man was polite to her, perhaps she would still mull over the validity of this matter. But since he had a prideful attitude, her trust in him increased. "Senior misunderstood me, I was only casually asking and wasn't doubting you. After all, I haven't heard your name before," Yi Qi politely said with an endearing smile. "Chi-Chi," Shui Ruer hurriedly tugged Yi Qi's clothes with worried features, "my master despises other people doubting his medical skills the most. You're better off not saying anything else." As expected, Yi Qi's words just caused the elderly man's expression to darken. He snorted with contempt, "How could people like you know this old man's name?" In the past, this old man had no desire for power and lived secluded in the forest. "If I didn't take a shine to Ruer's medical talents, I wouldn't have come out and accepted her as my disciple." The elderly man's expression was severe, and his tone had an overwhelming righteousness. The formidable aura emitted by his whole body finally eased Yi Qi's heart. "Senior, don't worry. As long as you save my foster mother, the Yi family will agree to any condition that you propose." Yi Qi faintly smiled. Foster mother's infertility had been their sore point for many years. If it weren't for this, foster father and foster mother would not have been kicked out of the Yi family. As soon as foster mother had a child, the Yi family would re-accept their branch. The elderly man haughtily glanced at Yi Qi. "Give me a bottle of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, and I'll immediately diagnose Madame Yi's condition." Joy burst out in Yi Qi's heart. "The Yi family trading company is managed by my brother, so the spirit-gathering medicinal liquids are all in his hands. Please follow me first, senior, I will bring you to meet older brother now." This time, if she was able to help foster mother, big brother would definitely think highly of her. Yi Qi turned to walk out of the estate with Shui Ruer and the elderly man following behind her. Then, the moment that they stepped out of the main courtyard, a fiery red figure descended from the sky and blocked their path. "Shui Ruer, have you forgotten the warning that I gave you? Who permitted you to come here?" Hua had her hands propped against her hips as she glared at them. Her pretty face was filled with anger, and her scarlet dress lightly fluttered in the breeze. It was as though the dress was dyed with fresh blood, so red that it was slightly stinging to the eyes. Shui Ruer's face drained of color, and she subconsciously hid behind Yi Qi while timidly looking at Hua. "You darn girl, this is my house. Who gave you the nerve to be this impudent at my house? How did your parents educate you?" Chapter 802. Jun Fengling has returned 2. Yi Qi angrily glared at Hua. However, after she spoke, Hua's figure suddenly appeared in front of her eyes from a few meters away, and a loud slap hit her face. "How my parents educated me has nothing to do with you, but I will discipline you for Yi Jingchen first." Hua mocked with her chin slightly raised. Yi Qi was stunned. She did not believe that Hua would dare to hit her inside the Yi residence. Especially since she did not notice her movements just now. How can you hit someone?" Shui Ruer's voice was very weak and did not have any deterrent force behind it. Her eyes contained a pitiful and delicate light, making others have tender affections for her. "I know that Miss Feng has misunderstandings regarding me and thinks I want to steal her man, but I really don't have any intent for that man. Why do you keep seeking trouble from me?" Towards the end, Shui Ruer's voice was full of grief and indignation. If someone unaware heard it, they would certainly think she suffered some great injustice. Clearly, the elderly man was one of them. He snorted, his lips turning up with a sneer. "I wonder how outstanding that man is to cause his woman to think my disciple wants to snatch him away. Does she really think that her man is universally appealing and everyone would like him? I believe he is beneath my disciple's standards. Hua glanced at the old man as though she was looking at an idiot. My sister's man is naturally very outstanding, your disciple wouldn't covet him otherwise. However, someone like your disciple isn't equal to a millionth of my sister. Even if my sister's husband was blind, he still wouldn't like her. Shui Ruer's eyes darkened. She did not think Yun Luofeng was better than her. It was only because Yun Xiao met Yun Luofeng first that she was unable to interfere. If he met her first, then she would certainly be the one who received his lifelong infatuation. Ha ha, the elderly man was so angry that he started laughing. I've lived for a long time, but I've never seen someone as conceited as you. My disciple not only has both looks and talent but also has an extremely fine personality. You actually said she can't compare to that woman. What a joke. If it weren't for Ruer looking down on your brother-in-law, he would already belong to Ruer. The old man glanced at Shui Ruer beside him, his features full of self-satisfaction. The man who my disciple takes a liking to will certainly be very outstanding. Since she didn't like him, it must mean that man is truly inadequate. Also, his voice briefly paused, suddenly becoming extremely severe. You, little girl, are quite rude. I want you to apologize to my disciple immediately. Otherwise, I won't treat Madame Yi. Yi Qi's heart jolted, and anxiety flickered through her eyes. Senior, I will definitely have her apologize to Ruer, you must save my foster mother. After saying this, she turned to Hua, her charming face instantly turned cold as she rebuked, immediately apologized to Ruer. Hua's lips pursed. Even Yi Jingchen doesn't dare to speak to me like this, who are you to do so? If it were anyone else who heard Hua's disrespect for Yi Jingchen, they would certainly be suspicious of her identity. However, since the current Yi Qi was already so angry that her eyes turned red, her brain did not process it. Chapter 803. Zhen Fengling has returned 3. As a guest of the Yi residence, you must obey me. If you don't apologize to Ruer, then I will kick you out, and you will sleep on the streets. She thought that Hua would certainly become afraid after she said that, but she was disappointed to realize that her face remained nonchalant even after she threatened her. Just as Yi Qi wanted to fly into a temper, she suddenly caught a glimpse of the people walking out from the rear court, and her eyes brightened instantly. Big brother, you are finally here. Her eyes always only saw Yi Eximo. As for Yun Luofeng and Yun Xiao who were beside him, they were completely overlooked. What happened? Yi Eximo coldly asked with a deep frown. Yi Qi gloatingly swept her eyes across Hua. Aren't you this audacious because you have Big Brother backing you up? However, you probably did not expect that the most important person in Big Brother's heart is always foster mother. He would surely give you up for foster mother. Thinking about this, Yi Qi looked at Yi Eximo and said, Big Brother, this is Ruer's master, and he claims that he has a way to treat foster mother's infertility. What did you say? Yi Eximo's heart fiercely jolted, and his hands emotionally grasped Yi Qi's shoulders. Are you speaking the truth? He can really cure foster mother's condition. Yi Qi nodded with certainty. That's right, he has the ability. However, this little girl humiliated Ruer just now, so he plans to leave in anger. If you want to retain him, you must make this girl apologize to Ruer. She gloatingly cast a glance at Hua again, and she smiled in schadenfreude. She could already picture Big Brother forcing her to apologize. The fervor on the man's ruggedly handsome face slowly receded, and his hands also gradually lowered. Yi Qi, I can agree to any other request, but I absolutely can't agree to this one. The smile on her face abruptly froze and her eyes widened with stupefaction. Her voice was slightly shaky as she asked, Big Brother, you still want to protect her even now? Without any regard for foster mother? She did not dare to believe that the Big Brother who she had always respected was someone like this. He would brush aside his foster mother for a little girl. Say no more. I won't agree no matter what. Yi Eximo's eyes grew colder, his face devoid of emotions. The elderly man's brows were also furrowed. In his view, having a little girl apologize was a very simple matter, but he did not expect that Yi Eximo would vehemently disagree. Master. Shui Ruer hurriedly tugged the elderly man's clothes and said quietly, Don't forget our purpose for coming here. She purposefully lowered her volume to speak this sentence, but young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao's ears were very sensitive, so they could clearly hear it regardless of how quiet she was. Young Luo Feng's brows imperceptibly went up as she languidly leaned against a tree trunk and looked at Shui Ruer with smiling, wicked eyes that glinted with an unclear emotion. As for Yun Xiao, no matter what Shui Ruer's purpose for coming here was, as long as that purpose was not Yun Luo Feng, then it had nothing to do with him. He would not waste time on unimportant people. This old man is magnanimous and won't squabble with a little girl. The elderly man haughtily glanced at Hua Huo before turning his gaze toward Yi Eximo and saying, "To be honest, if it weren't for my disciple coming to beg me, I wouldn't treat anyone. But since I've decided to act, my medical fee can't be low. Give me a spirit-gathering medicinal liquid first, then I will diagnose Madame Yi." Chapter 804. Jun Fengling has returned. 4. Spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. Yi Eximo's brows furrowed. The spirit-gathering medicinal liquid doesn't belong to the Yi family, so I can't make this decision. You should propose another request. The elderly man frowned. Since the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid is sold by the Yi family trading company, then its owner must rely on your trading company. Having her give you a bottle of the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid isn't any big deal. Yi Eximo's frown deepened, and his expression was also livid. The owner of the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid isn't dependent on our Yi family trading company. We have a mutually beneficial relationship, and I don't have the power to demand merchandise from her. That's simple. The elderly man smiled. Tell her that if she doesn't give you a bottle of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, you will publicize her identity. I imagine she surely wouldn't set herself against Yi family trading company then. Yi Eximo grew furious. The Yi family trading company has its own rules. It absolutely won't divulge a customer's information. You want to make me go back on my word? The elderly man's expression also became displeased. Why don't you know to be more flexible? What is more important, your reputation or your foster mother's health? Ha ha. Suddenly, Yi Eximo started laughing. It's unknown whether he was laughing from amusement or anger. My Yi family trading company has 500-year-old medicinal herbs that can be traded with a spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. If you can cure my foster mother, then I will use those herbs to exchange for it. The prerequisite was that he must completely cure foster mother's condition. Young Luo Feng wickedly glanced at Yi Eximo and faintly smiled. If Yi Eximo requested it of her, she would not have declined. But he did not do so and chose to use the medicinal herbs in his possession to exchange for the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. Perhaps this was why Yi Eximo gave her a favorable impression. Young Master Yi, it's not that I won't cure Madame Yi, but the fee for my treatment is not as simple as one bottle of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. I require 10 bottles. 10 bottles of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid required 50,500-year-old medicinal herbs. And the number of medicinal herbs currently possessed by the Yi family trading company could only exchange 4 bottles at most. Nevertheless, Yi Eximo uttered between clenched teeth, "All right, as long as you can cure my foster mother so that she can successfully become pregnant, I can exchange 100 bottles for you, let alone 10. Worst comes to worst, he would shamelessly return to the Yi family and obtain enough medicinal herbs to exchange 10 bottles of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid for foster mother. At the end, Yi Eximo added, the prerequisite is that you cure my foster mother first." The elderly man's expression abruptly darkened. He gave an exorbitant price just now to force Yi Eximo to agree to his previous request, but who knew he would agree to it without hesitation? He had a fair idea of his own ability. He did not have the skill to treat Jun Fengling to begin with. An intent to back out suddenly burgeoned in his mind at that moment. Yi Eximo was extremely wily and not as easy to deceive as Yi Qi. It would not be so easy to swindle the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid from him. If it weren't for the fact that he only had 4 500-year-old medicinal herbs and was missing one 500-year-old herb, he would not have used this swindling method. Thinking to hear, the elderly man's eyes shifted a few times before a thought flashed through his eyes. He placed his fist to his lips and dryly coughed before saying, "All right. I agree to treat Madame Yi first. But I will add another term to the terms of her treatment." Chapter 805. Jun Fengling has returned. 5. He slightly raised his chin and haughtily looked down on the little girl Hua Huo. "Have this girl kneel and apologize to my disciple." Since Yi Eximo was so fond of this little girl, he definitely would not agree to his terms, so he could logically back out as well. As expected, Yi Eximo's eyes darkened, and he coldly stated, "I already said that I absolutely can't agree to your request." The elderly man's lips quirked up. "Since you won't agree, forgive me for being unable to comply to your request. Farewell, Ruer, let's go." After saying this, he turned around to leave. "Hold on." Yi Qi anxiously stomped her feet. "Big brother, so what if you have this girl apologize? Could it be that foster mother isn't as important as this girl in your heart?" Yi Eximo's expression grew cold. "Yi Qi, shut up. What right do you have to make me shut up?" Yi Qi furiously turned to Huo. "Although the girl is so young, her methods are quite brilliant. Of course, I believe that it's because someone else is instructing her. She wouldn't seduce you like this otherwise." Yi Eximo was startled. He did not expect Yi Qi to get the wrong idea about Huo and him. "Yi Qi, what nonsense are you saying?" He lightly frowned. "Huo has a special status. If you want to be rude to her and get burned in the end, don't blame me for not advising you." Seeing how protective Yi Eximo was about Huo, jealousy filled her heart. Her status is quite special indeed. The future young lady of the Yi family. "Big brother, I've misjudged you. I didn't think you would be a pedophile." "Yi Qi." Yi Eximo was smoking from his anger. "Who told you these things?" Yi Qi retorted with a sneer, "What? Did I hit the mark? I'm only warning you because I'm your sister. This little girl is nothing good. She only approached you because of the Yi family. This is why she wreaked havoc everywhere and won't allow senior to diagnose foster mother's condition. She's afraid that foster mother having her own child would jeopardize your position, but you continue to trust her without a doubt." Yi Qi's pitch unconsciously got higher, and her face was incredibly furious. "But aren't you letting down foster father and foster mother by being like this?" Yi Eximo tightly clenched his fists, and it was only by deeply inhaling that he prevented himself from walking up and beating up Yi Qi. At this time, laughter suddenly traveled from outside the courtyard, especially clear in this silent court. "What did Moer do to let me down? Tell me. I'm very curious how he let down brother Yi and me." Yi Qi shuddered and slowly turned around. He looked at the man and woman who dismounted from the handsome horse. Her eyes reddened, and tears of indignance fell down. "Foster father, foster mother, you've finally returned." Dressed in bright red clothing, akin to a scarlet flame, she energetically strode into the courtyard. Young Luo Feng was taken back, and a light flickered in her wicked eyes as she muttered, "It's them." Evidently, she still had a great impression of the woman who inquired about their names back in the forest of no return, but she did not anticipate her to be Yi Eximo's foster mother. "Foster mother." Yi Eximo's expression finally relaxed as he said, "Didn't you go to find brother? Why did you come back this quickly?" Jun Fengling's brows slightly raised. "I heard about the mishap that occurred in Yi City, so I hurried back with your foster father. Moer, can you tell me what happened?" After saying this, her line of sight swept toward Yun Luofeng and she was stunned the moment she caught sight of the two people. Chapter 806. Jun Fengling has returned. 6. Foster mother, it's like this. Yi Eximo glanced at Yi Qi and said, Shui Ruer took a liking to Miss Feng's man and purposefully made Yi Qi target Miss Feng and even claim that Miss Feng instructed Huo to seduce me. Then, foster father and you came back. Jun Fengling heard Yi Eximo's words before she regained her wits, astonishment flashing through her phoenix eyes. Miss Feng. Foster mother, let me introduce you to two people. Yi Eximo smiled. These two are my new friends. Her name is Feng Luian, and the other is her man, Xiao Yun. Jun Fengling's sight gradually drifted from Yi Eximo to Yun Luofeng and imperceptibly raised her bows. Didn't you say you're called Lin Ruobai? And you, she turned to Yun Xiao, aren't you called Yun Mo? Yi Qi, who originally wanted to complain, was dumbfounded. Foster mother knew them. In comparison, Yun Luofeng, who was exposed on the spot, was not embarrassed at all and earnestly said, Lin Ruobai is my pet name. Oh, is that so? Since your surname is Feng, why is your pet name Lin? Because my mother's surname is Lin. From what I know, your mother's name is Bai Ling. Jun Fengling smiled, incredibly pleased with herself, as though making Yun Luofeng choke on her words was something that made her proud. Who told this girl to call herself Lin Ruobai? If she did not use a false name, she would not have searched for them outside for this long. Thankfully, the heavens were blessing her, and she finally found them. The smile on Luo Feng's face slowly disappeared, and her breathing became heavier. You know me. At this time, Yun Xiao, who originally was not paying attention to this dispute, finally turned his face because this matter became related to Luo Feng. His eyes bared a barely distinguishable icy glint. Under his cold gaze, Zhang Fengling's lips turned up with a faint smile, and she directly looked at Luo Feng with fearless expression. I don't know you, I only know Luo Feng. If you're Luo Feng, then you are my acquaintance. Luo Feng slightly narrowed her eyes, a dangerous glint flitting through them. And what is your relationship to her? I'm her mother-in-law. Tell me, what is my relationship to you? Zhang Fengling's smile deepened and intently watched Luo Feng. Luo Feng's face finally froze. She said she is her mother-in-law, so she is Yun Xiao's mother. After hearing this, Yun Xiao's expression also briefly shifted but quickly returned to its normal lack of expression. To him, the word, mother, was already a very distant memory. So distant that he had already forgotten her face. Yi Qi's face turned from dark to pale and from pale to dark again. She took a few steps back and tightly bit her lips before asking, these two people are the ones who foster father and foster mother wanted to search for. The most hilarious part was that she actually wanted to kick them out of the Yi residence. She was nothing but a foster daughter. What right did she have to kick out foster mother's biological son and daughter-in-law? Currently, Yi Qi's mental state had already drastically transformed, and her tightly bit lips remained ghastly pale. Shui Ruer's thoughts turned 100 times. If this man was truly their son, then she wanted to obtain him even more. As long as she became his woman, she would also become the mistress of Yi City. Even Yi Qi and her brother would need to live according to her mood and will. At that moment, Shui Ruer decided that she would become Yun Xiao's wife no matter what. Chapter 807, Shui Ruer being stupid 1. Crap. At this time, Yi Eximo, who had been dumbfounded, suddenly cursed, isn't Feng Luoyan reversed Luo Feng? Xiao Yun reversed is also Yun Xiao. I actually didn't realize this until now. Sister, you have deceived Big Brother terribly. He finally understood why he had such a great favorable impression of these two complete strangers. It turned out that Yun Xiao was his younger brother. Moreover, Yi Jingchen did not allow the joy from the family reunion to muddle his brain and turned to Yi Eximo with a gentle look, asking, can you tell us what happened just now again? Foster father, to sum it up, these people were accusing Huo of receiving orders from sister-in-law to seduce me. They also forced Huo to apologize to Shui Ruer, but I didn't agree to it, which is what caused this dispute. Yi Jingchen's expression gradually darkened, and his line of sight fell on Yi Qi. Seeing the man's severe expression, Yi Qi's heart trembled. Foster father, Did your brother speak the truth? Yi Jingchen harshly interrupted Yi Qi's words. Yi Qi bit her lips and lowered her head. I'm sorry, foster father, I didn't know they were older brother and his wife. The physician brought here by Ruer claimed that he could treat foster mother, but Huo's rude words caused senior to be unwilling to diagnose foster mother. I merely wanted foster mother to be able to carry a child, which is why I wanted Huo to apologize to Ruer. Seeing the situation turning unfavorable, the old man wanted to sneak away, but before he could go anywhere, Yi Qi already guided the topic to him, and his expression instantly shifted. Yi Jingchen raised his brows minutely, his sharp gaze shooting to the old man like a knife, and he coldly asked, you wanted to have Huo apologize to Shui Ruer. I would like to see if you have what it takes. Yi Qi's eyes widened in shock. Hasn't foster father always dearly loved foster mother like a precious treasure? She originally thought that foster father would give consideration to foster mother's health first when she spoke those words, but she did not expect him to act the same as big brother and protect the little girl without any consideration. Just where did this girl come from? Why were they so protective of her? The elderly man's expression turned cold. Since it's like this, pretend I never came. Ruer, let's go. He turned around, wanting to leave the Yi residence, but the moment he took a step, bright laughter rang out behind him. You claimed that you could treat me. Zhang Fengling's lips quirked up and she walked to beside Yi Jingchen with a cold smile. Joy entered Yi Qi's heart, and her previously anxious heart finally settled. As long as foster mother wanted to be treated, then based on her authority in Yi City, foster father certainly would not dissent from her. That's right, the elderly man uttered between clenched teeth. Even now, he continued to maintain that he could treat Jun Fengling and absolutely would not admit he came here to swindle them. Jun Fengling's brows went up. Back then, Brother Yi searched for famous doctors all over for me, and they all said that they could not treat my condition, but you can allegedly treat me. So, I only have one question, what is your name on this continent? My name isn't something you deserve. The old man looked up and was about to say that Jun Fengling did not deserve to know in an attempt to keep up his pretense but ended up being interrupted by Yi Qi. Foster mother, he is named Wu Lin. He has been living in seclusion deep in the mountains in the past, so he is not as well known as the other godly doctors. Chapter 808. Shui Ruer being stupid too. At that moment, the elderly man's expression drastically changed, and he viciously glared at Yi Qi. Shui Ruer's expression also was not too great. She should not have told this idiot master's name. This idiot truly could not accomplish anything but was liable to spoil everything. Wu Lin, Jun Fengling smiled, why haven't I heard of anyone with your name on this continent? Who's your teacher? The elderly man's complexion was dark as he tightly clenched his fists, cold sweat dripping down his back. If you haven't heard of me, it's because you are too ignorant. I dare to say that my medical skill might not be the best in the world, but it is certainly second best. Is that so? The smile in her eyes deepened as she slowly walked toward the old man and said with raised brows, then treat me right now. I would like to see your skill. The old man gnawed on his teeth. I won't take back the words I said. Unless that girl apologizes, I won't do anything. Right after the elderly man spoke his words, an ice-cold longsword was abruptly positioned on his neck, making him freeze. He dumbfoundedly looked up and was met with the woman's valiant and graceful bearing. Her red clothes made her appear like wind and fire, domineering and alluring. You either treat me or choose to die. Having Hua apologize? No way. The elderly man was completely stupefied. On this continent, the status of a physician was very noble. Regardless of how strong someone was, they would still be polite to a renowned physician. He never expected that Jun Fengling, this malicious woman, would be domineering to this extent and directly use a sword to threaten him. He harshly swallowed a mouthful of saliva, his heart ceaselessly trembling. How could he be able to treat Jun Fengling's condition? Or is it that you have no way of treating me? As soon as Jing Lingfeng put some force to the sword in her hand, a red cut appeared on his neck. You should know well the price of coming to Yi City to swindle people. Cold sweat trickled down the old man's forehead as his geriatric face drained of colors. Under Jun Fengling's threat, he could not withstand it and knelt on the ground with a plop. Madam Yi, I was wrong. I shouldn't have come to the Yi residence to swindle people. I couldn't cure you from the start. I beg you to let me go. The old man kowtowed, his head fiercely banging against the ground. Compared with surviving, his pride was useless. Nothing was more important than surviving. Yi Qi was dumbstruck and looked at the old man kneeling on the ground with disbelief, her face as white as paper. She was deceived by this old thing, and even deepened her conflict with Big Brother because of this. Thinking to this point, an endless fury rushed into her heart, and she walked up, viciously kicking the old man's chest. You old bastard, you dared to lie to me. You even caused me to fight with Big Brother and misunderstand second brother and second sister-in-law. This was all your fault. Yi Qi's face was completely red from anger, and the force behind her kick grew stronger. She would like nothing more than to kick the old thing to death. Remember, the possessions of the Yi residents are not that easy to swindle. Also, I, Jun Fengling, always hold a grudge. So I will publicize your actions today and let everyone in the world learn of your conduct. Chapter 809, Shui Ruer being stupid 3. The old man's legs weakened, and he fell to the ground with lifeless eyes and despair rushing into his heart. Jun Fengling was a member of the Yi family, and no one would doubt her words. If his swindling was brought to light, there would be no place for him on this continent. Get lost already, Jun Fengling harshly shouted. The old man hurriedly scrambled up from the ground and darted out of the estate, afraid that he would suffer from Jun Fengling's inhuman revenge if he stayed. Shui Ruer watched the old man's departing figure, stupefied, as though she had not recovered from this sudden turn of events. Shui Ruer, Yi Qi furiously yelled, shouldn't you give me an explanation? Upon hearing Yi Qi's angry voice, Shui Ruer suddenly covered her face and started crying. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I had too much faith in my master, so I believed him when he said he had an 80% chance. I really didn't know he wanted to swindle the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. Tears dripped from the gaps of her fingers, and her body was madly trembling from her immense sadness. Chi-Chi, this is all my fault. I nearly harmed your family. I don't have the right to see you ever again. Shui Ruer was already crying this pitifully, so how could Yi Qi bear to continue blaming her? Moreover, from the bottom of her heart, she believed that Shui Ruer was merely deceived by Wu Lin. Ruer, I shouldn't have blamed you just now, you're also innocent and this matter has nothing to do with you. Yi Qi gently comforted as her expression eased. Their conversation caused young Luo Feng to involuntarily glance at Yi Qi first and then Yi Eximo, a faint smile appearing on her lips. As expected, seeing how easily Yi Qi believed Shui Ruer, Yi Eximo's complexion was not too great, and he snorted before turning around to head into the rear court. Miss Shui, a glint flickered through Zhun Fengling's eyes before she turned to look at the crying girl with a small smile, asking, Moer said that you like shower. Shui Ruer panicked a little and hurriedly explained herself, Madam, I know I come from a humble background, so I'm not worthy of young Master Xiao, so how could I dare to have such presumptuous thoughts? She claimed that she only acknowledged she was unworthy of Yun Xiao due to her humble background, but she did not deny that she liked Yun Xiao. After all, in Shui Ruer's mind, what mother doesn't hope for her son to be universally loved? If she said that she did not like Yun Xiao, how could she still accept her in the future as Yun Xiao's mother? Oh, Zhun Fengling lightly nodded, that's good, you do know your place and realize my shower isn't someone that you can desire. Shui Ruer's expression instantly turned pale, and she tightly bit down on her lips without a sound. Seeing her appearance, Yi Qi had some pity for her, but she did not dare to say anything in front of Zhun Fengling and could only look at Shui Ruer apologetically. Madam, don't worry, Shui Ruers looked up with a forlorn smile, I really don't have any motives toward young Master Xiao. Although he will have many concubines in the future, I won't be included among them. Although she could not obtain Yun Xiao now, she still must cause trouble for Yun Luofeng and make her understand that as Yi Jingchen's stepson, Yun Xiao absolutely could not only have her. Hence, after saying this, Shui Ruer could not resist peering at Yun Luofeng. Chapter 810, Shui Ruer being stupid 4. Who knew that the girl would act like she did not hear her words and was only concerned about whispering something to the man beside her that made his cold expression melt in a heartbeat. His eyes, which were as dark as the night, looked at her with deep affection. Shui Ruer bit her lips, and a dark light flashed through her downcast eyes. I'll let you gloat a little longer. Since Zhun Fengling is his mother, she must long for her son to have a countless number of women and to have a many progenies. No matter how in love they are, she could be his, but he could never be hers alone. However, the woman's displeased voice was suddenly heard above her, I'm glad you think this way. But there's no need for concubines. I don't wish for my son to have a restless household. Initially, Zhun Fengling was only aloof towards Shui Ruer, but now, it had progressed to dissatisfaction. Shui Ruer suddenly realized her error, and her face turned paler. How could she forget? Yi Jingchen only had Zhun Fengling for all these years. Even when she could not give birth to any children, he still did not take any concubines. However, she actually stupidly mentioned that Yun Xiao would take concubines in the future in front of Zhun Fengling. Wasn't that the same as offending her? Madam, I'm sorry, I spoke without thinking. I didn't mean it. Shui Ruer was very upset. How could a woman as domineering as Zhun Fengling accept her man to have multiple women? Her ideology had already transcended the secular world. You spoke without thinking. Zhun Fengling sneered, why do I feel like you are a smart person? How can someone like you speak without thinking? Forget it, you should leave. Come to the Yi residence less from now on and have less contact with my children. Towards the end, Zhun Fengling was already impatient and did not want to sugarcoat her words. Shui Ruer wiped the tears from her eyes and swiftly darted out of the courtyard. Ruer, Yi Qi stamped her foot, wanting to chase after her. However, before she could take more than 2 steps, Zhun Fengling's rebuke was heard from behind. Stop right there. Yi Qi turned around resentfully. Foster mother, why do you all target her like that? Zhan Fengling lightly sighed. Qi, you should listen to your brother more. He won't hurt you. The ones who truly hurt you are those who you deem as innocent. Yi Qi was startled. Was foster mother referring to Ruer? How could that be? Why would Ruer hurt her? Return to your room, and think about it. Zhan Fengling swept her eyes across Yi Qi before turning around and walking toward Yun Luo Feng and Yun Xiao, a smile appearing on her gorgeous face. What? Don't you two have something to say to me? Yun Luo Feng's lips turned up with a languid smile. I didn't expect you to be Yun Xiao's mother. It looks like we have quite the predestined affinity. Am I correct, Auntie? Why do you still call me Auntie? Zhan Fengling pretended to be displeased, but her eyes were full of happiness. Since you are Xiao's fiance, you should naturally call me Mother. Mother. She and Yun Xiao would get married sooner or later. It was no big deal to call her Mother early, so she did not reject Zhan Fengling's suggestion. How well behaved. Her address made Zhan Fengling beam with joy in response. Calling me Mother was a good choice. After all, I've prepared a gift for you already. She pulled out a jade pendant from the folds of her robe and stuffed it into Yun Luo Feng's hand. The vivid character, Zhan, was very eye-catching on the pendant and gleamed under the sun. Chapter 811, Shui Ruer being stupid 5. When they saw Zhan Fengling pull out the jade pendant, Yi Jingchen and Yi Qi were both startled, shock entering their gaze. Although they were not aware of the history of the pendant, they knew that Zhan Fengling had always treated this pendant like a precious treasure. But she actually gave it to Yun Luo Feng without batting an eye. Normally, she could not bear to even have someone touch it, let alone giving it to someone. Yun Luo Feng's importance in her heart was apparent from this. This jade pendant doesn't have many uses for you, but the materials of the pendant are a bit special, and it can block mortal injuries for you 3 times. However, it's only 3 times. After the 3rd time, it will become a normal jade pendant. Yun Luo Feng was briefly taken back. Does this pendant have some other special meaning to you? It's not suitable for you to give it to me, right? Zhan Fengling smiled. This pendant was given to me by my father, who is also your grandfather. It has accompanied me for many, many years, but it has no other use besides a remembrance token for me. For you though, you often provoke strong enemies, and I can't be at ease if you don't have some protection items with you. It was evident that Zhen Lingfeng knew Yun Luo Feng's personality long ago. She had always immediately started hitting without asking questions and made enemies no matter where she was. This was why she took out her beloved jade pendant. Yun Luo Feng was moved. Without mentioning the effect of the pendant, just the fact that Zhan Fengling gave her a memorial item that her father left for her already indirectly proved she thought of her as family. Especially since her tone was incredibly indulgent, it was as though she did not care that Yun Luo Feng made enemies and was only worrying about her safety. Zhan Fengling looked at Yun Xiao with a smile and inquired, how about you? We haven't seen each other for many years, don't you have something to say to Mother? Yun Xiao's cold expression slightly shifted, but he could not utter, Mother, in the end. After thinking about it a little, he asked, you set up a betrothal between me and the Ling family. After hearing this, Zhan Fengling tightly furrowed her brows. That rings a bell, but it's been so long that I have nearly forgotten about it. Where is the betrothal token? Yun Xiao's voice was low and rough. I lost it. Zhan Fengling's lips quirked up. Lost it. Yun Xiao's expression darkened in a flash. He had such a hard time breaking the engagement because she lost the betrothal token. What, did someone from the Ling family look for you to get engaged to you? Zhan Fengling asked with a raise of her brows. Although Yi Jingchen had an acquaintance from Long Xia continent and received news of Yun Xiao and Yun Luo Feng over the years, normal people could not enter the location of the Xiao family. Hence, Zhan Fengling had no clue about the events that occurred back at the Xiao estate. They wanted to break the betrothal, and I agreed. Yun Xiao dryly glanced at Zhan Fengling. However, they firmly believed that I was only verbally agreeing and was not actually willing to break the betrothal, which is why I hid the betrothal token. What? As soon as Zhan Fengling heard this, she flew into a rage and angrily said, wasn't it enough for those people to expel you from the Xiao family? They actually came to you again and said my son wasn't willing to break his engagement with a little girl from the Ling family. It was the Xiao family who decided your betrothal back then. I never thought that a little girl from the Ling family was worthy of you. Yuan Xiao's low voice was heard again. The members of the Xiao family also said that you were taken away by a mysterious person. Is that person someone from the Yi family? Chapter 812. Excited, dumbstruck 1. Zhan Fengling started before shaking her head. The one who took me away wasn't from the Yi family. I only became acquainted with Brother Yi later in the Forest of No Return. Then, she turned her head and looked at Yi Jingchen with a faint smile and an intense affection in her eyes. Back then, that mysterious person left after taking me away. Later I inadvertently received news about that woman from the Xiao family tossing you into the Forest of No Return, so I went there to search for you. Who knew that I would not only be unable to find you but also suffer serious injuries? Brother Yi saved me while passing by and brought me back to the Yi family. Zhan Fengling smiled. Her smile was beautiful to the point of dazzling people. Xiao, I wasn't by your side these past years, but I know the basics of everything that happened to Fenger and you. I'm very honored to have such an excellent son and daughter-in-law. She slowly retracted her gaze and held Luo Feng and Yuan Xiao's hands, placing them close together. This life, I don't wish for anything other than you two spending the rest of your life together hand in hand. Yi Jingchen quietly walked over to Zhan Fengling's side, and a gentle smile appeared on his lips. During these past years, only he knew how tormented Zhan Fengling was. If there were no news coming from the other continent to support her, perhaps she would not have been able to continue holding on. Since you gave me a greeting gift, I also prepared a present for you. Luo Feng put away the pendant and took out 2 fruits from her space ring and handed one each to Zhan Fengling and Yi Jingchen. These 2 fruits are my greeting gift for you. Yi Qi was dumbfounded. Her foster mother gave her such a valuable jade pendant as a greeting gift, but she merely took out 2 fruits as a half-hearted present. How could someone be stingy to this extent? Zhan Fengling did not mind though and happily accepted the fruit while saying, "Isn't there a saying, it's not the gift that counts, but the thought behind it. The fruit that my daughter-in-law gives me is definitely better than a fruit from outside." The fruits that Luo Feng took out were shockingly spiritual fruits bred from the red hackberry fruits. Because the outer appearance went through some changes after the breeding, Zhan Fengling was unable to recognize it as a red hackberry fruit. She placed the fruit on her lips and took a small bite. Instantly, its sweet juice flowed into her mouth, relaxing her entire body. Boom! Suddenly, Zhan Fengling's body shuddered, and a powerful spiritual energy erupted from her body and knocked open the bottleneck that had been preventing her from advancing to the next level. Above her head, the spiritual energy from the heavens and earth circulated endlessly, announcing that she had successfully advanced a level. What happened? Yi Eximo hurriedly ran out from the rear court. The moment he entered, he saw his parents and sister stunned in place with confusion on their face. He quickly became just as stunned when he saw the spiritual energy whirling above Zhan Fengling. He asked with a blank stare, "Foster mother, you made a breakthrough." Foster mother had been stuck at the bottleneck for several years already and did not have any previous signs of a breakthrough, so how did she suddenly break through now? Zhan Fengling was the first to come back to her senses. She clearly understood that she only broke through because of the fruit that Luo Feng gave her, and a peculiar light involuntarily surfaced in her eyes. "Fenger, can you tell me what happened?" Instantly, their eyes gathered on Luo Feng and waited for her to give them an answer. Chapter 813. Excited, dumbstruck 2. Luo Feng shrugged. "Your luck was rather good, and you happened to be at the bottleneck, so you were able to use the spiritual fruit to break through." Of course, there was another reason that Zhan Fengling could break through. Several days ago, she was suddenly inspired to pour the bottle of holy water that she received from Lin Ruobai's father on the red hackberry tree. However, she did not know the effects of a spiritual fruit watered by the sacred water, so she used this opportunity to test it out. She did not expect for the spiritual fruit to have a higher potency than previously, so much so that it could allow a god-level spirit cultivator to break through. It truly exceeded her expectations. Thinking to this point, Luo Feng could not help but look at Yuan Xiao. "These things are useless for me," Yuan Xiao explained after sensing Luo Feng's thoughts. The method that he learned was relatively peculiar, so these items that relied on exterior forces to break through was completely useless for him. Luo Feng raised her brows without much disappointment in her eyes. They only had to wait for her to break through to god level before she could dual cultivate with Yuan Xiao. At that time, both of their strengths would progress. Sister-in-law, I didn't expect you to have such a good item in your possession. Yi Eximo aggrievedly looked at young Luo Feng. Why don't you know to give a greeting gift to your brother too? Young Luo Feng glanced at Yi Eximo. If you encounter a bottleneck while advancing to God level in the future, I can sell a fruit to you. The corner of Yi Eximo's mouth twitched, and the grievance in his eyes grew. Sister-in-law, you're being biased. The ones in foster father and foster mother's hands are given by you. Why do I have to buy mine? Young Luo Feng nodded in agreement. I am very biased indeed. However, I can't help it. It's not my fault that my heart was born slanted. Yi Eximo felt so wrong that he almost started crying, and his eyes were brimming with resentment, making him look like he was abandoned by someone. Big brother Yi, young Luo Feng did not know whether to laugh or cry and clapped Yi Eximo's shoulder with an upward turn of her lips. Forget it. I won't tease you. After you reach God level, I will give a spiritual fruit to you. It was only then that a smile finally appeared on his face. Having young Luo Feng's guarantee was more important than anything. Yi Qi also wanted young Luo Feng's spiritual fruit, but after recalling her actions toward her, she could not voice her desire no matter what. Young Luo Feng turned to look at Jun Fengling with raised brows. I heard that you are infertile. Jun Fengling nodded and sighed before answering, an old, hidden disease causes me to be unable to carry a child now. We've searched for innumerable godly doctors, but they all can't treat it. This was why they were kicked out of the Yi family. Young Luo Feng was silent for a moment before saying, let me take a look. All right. Jun Fengling knew young Luo Feng's ability, so she did not reject and smiled. However, don't be pressured at all. Even if my body can't be treated, it's nothing big. I only regret being unable to leave a child behind for brother Yi. She already had Yun Xiao, so she naturally did not mind, but she regretted being unable to leave an heir for Yi Jingchen. Do you need to take my pulse? Jun Fengling asked while looking up and extending her wrist. I never need to take a pulse when I treat people. Young Luo Feng only needed to glance at someone to determine their condition. This was why she knew her body's condition the first time that she met Jun Fengling. However, that was only a rough assessment, and she needed to attentively observe if she wanted to thoroughly understand it. It was a long while before young Luo Feng retracted her gaze. I understand your condition. It's no big deal, I can treat it. Chapter 814, Shui Ruer is duped 1. I can treat you. The girl's airy voice was like a heavy hammer, fiercely pounding on the heart of everyone present and making them jolt. Jun Fengling blankly stared at the girl and clearly did not fully comprehend her words yet. You are speaking the truth. She can truly treat me. Young Luo Feng lightly nodded. I'm missing some herbs, so have someone bring those herbs here later, and I will start treating you today. Jun Fengling and Yi Jingcheng looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. If she could really get pregnant, then the people from the Yi family would not have the right to expel them from the clan. All right, Yi Lingchen suppressed the excitement in his heart and said, give me a list of the herbs that you need and I'll immediately send someone to obtain them. She had heard of young Luo Feng's medical skill since long ago, so if she said she could treat her, then she believed she had this ability. Brother Yi, I will leave this matter to you then. I still have many things to say to Shower and Fenger. Don't disturb us before dinner. Jun Fengling blinked at Yi Jingchen and instantly took young Luo Feng's hand, pulling her toward the rear court. Seeing that she was taking young Luo Feng away, Yun Xiao naturally followed as well. Yi Eximo looked away from young Luo Feng's figure and turned to the ashen Yi Qi with a small frown. They are your brother and sister-in-law. Be more polite to them from now on. Don't be used by other people. Yi Qi was startled and lowered her head, quietly muttering, Ruer was also deceived. She's innocent. Although she said it very faintly, Yi Eximo still heard it and snorted, I don't care how much you trust Shui Ruer. I only know that those two are foster father and foster mother's family. Without foster father and foster mother these past years, we wouldn't exist. I won't allow you to do anything that will hurt younger brother and his wife. He paused briefly before adding, if you were anyone else, I wouldn't say anything to you. I'm only willing to say this much to you because you're my sister. I don't hope for our family to never have peace. Although he had never met Yun Xiao before this, he knew how much his brother had suffered while outside. Now that he and sister-in-law uneasily returned, How could he permit other people to continue hurting them? Yi Qi looked up. I don't like Yun Luo Feng. Who told you to yell at me because of them? However, I like foster father and foster mother. For their sake, I wouldn't do anything to hurt them, don't worry. Yi Eximo did not say anything else and merely shot Yi Qi another cold glance before turning around to head toward the rear court. If his younger sister was not too stupid, perhaps it would not be so bad. However, he did not like her stupidity. Yi Qi slightly lowered her eyes, and hesitation flashed through her eyes, but in the end, she decided to leave the Yi residence. Yi Qi only just walked into the tall and extravagant restaurant before she ran into a woman wearing red clothes. The woman was especially stunning, akin to a red peony, gorgeous and sumptuous. Hold on. Seeing Yi Qi walking past, the red-clothed woman suddenly called out, blocking her steps. Chapter 815. Shui Ruer is duped too. You again. A small frown appeared on Yi Qi's pretty face. She impatiently glanced at the red-robed woman and asked, why do you keep bothering me? Ever since this woman found her a few days ago, she kept praising Yun Xiao in front of her, but her heart already admitted Yi Eximo, so she would not like other men no matter how good they were. Miss Yi, I don't have any bad intentions. I only wanted to tell you everything that I know. I heard that your missing second brother is a besotted and exceptional good man. If you obtain him, he will certainly only have affections for you, so I merely want to help you. Apologies, I'm not interested. Yi Qi's expression darkened. If you don't have anything else, don't find me. If my foster father and mother heard your words, they definitely wouldn't let me off. Hearing this, Jin Yu's brows went up. You don't have any interest in Yun Xiao indeed, but I know who's the person in your heart. Yi Qi's body abruptly froze. She spun around with ice in her eyes. What do you mean? Jin Yu's face was coldly gorgeous. Don't you understand what I mean? Do you want me to say Yi Eximo is the one you like in front of everyone? However, I heard that Yun Luo Feng and Yun Xiao are already here, but the one you like keeps protecting them and opposing you. Don't you hate it? She successfully saw Yi Qi's abrupt change of expression and slowly approached her. So, we can cooperate. As long as you're willing. Enough. Yi Qi started trembling and angrily shouted, my life was given by foster father and foster mother, but you want to make me pay back their kindness with malice. So what if I dislike them? I still won't do anything that will make foster mother sad. Jin Yu was taken back. Just as she wanted to say something else to provoke Yi Qi, the girl headed up to the second floor and disappeared from her sight. Watching the direction that Yi Qi left, Jin Yu's heart suddenly sunk. A cold smile appeared on her face and she turned around, wanting to leave the restaurant. However, a soft voice was suddenly heard from the side. You know Yun Luo Feng. Jin Yu turned around with raised brows and was met with a gentle and beautiful face. The pretentious girl was dressed completely in white. Hatred flashed through her eyes in the blink of an eye, but Jin Yu still easily caught it. You are? Jin Yu asked with a slight frown. Shui Ruer tightly clenched her fists. I'm Yi Qi's friend and have a close relationship with the Yi family. You know Yun Luo Feng. Jin Yu's lips quirked up. You are enemies with her. That's right, we are irreconcilable enemies. Shui Ruer purposefully lowered her voice, and an intense hatred emitted from her eyes. If someone unaware saw this, they would think the other person excavated her ancestors' graves. Tell me more. Jin Yu was quite interested. Yun Luo Feng had not arrived the land of no return for that long, but she had already made an enemy. More than that, an irreconcilable enemy. It turned out her master was correct, Yun Luo Feng was a troublemaker. There was not anyone who she had not provoked. Shui Ruer restrained the malice in her eyes. She stole my man. Is that considered an irreconcilable enmity? Jin Yu was startled, and her lips turned up with a sneer. Your man, are you referring to Yun Xiao? Chapter 816. Shui Ruer is duped 3. That's right, Shui Ruer snorted, I don't think I am worse than Yun Luo Feng. My only shortcoming is meeting Yun Xiao later than her. However, I truly don't understand why Yun Xiao's mother takes such a shine to her but belittles me. From what I heard, Yun Luo Feng came from Long Xia continent, so her status is lower than mine. Jin Yu's expression slowly grew cold. She did not like hearing those words. What did she mean she was not worse than Yun Luo Feng? If Yun Luo Feng was inferior, why would her master want to marry her by any possible means? Was she saying that Yun Xiao had bad taste? Didn't that also mean her master had bad taste? Jin Yu deeply loved Bai Su, so how could she permit anyone to say anything bad about him? Hence, anger rushed into her heart, and she said with a frosty smile, "There is a method for you to obtain Yun Xiao." What method? Shui Ruer's eyes lit up as she asked. A sinister emotion flickered through Jin Yu's eyes. "I have a bottle of medicinal liquid here. You only need to spray it on yourself, and it will make the one you want to seduce fall deeply in love with you." After saying this, Jin Yu dug out a bottle from the folds of her clothes and handed it to Shui Ruer. "I originally wanted to give this to Yi Qi, but that girl didn't fall into my trap, so I can only give it to you." Shui Ruer hesitantly accepted the bottle and asked, "This medicinal liquid can really make Yun Xiao fall in love with me?" She was used to being cautious. This medicinal liquid might be poisonous, which was why she asked that. Jin Yu coldly chuckled, "You only need a drop of this liquid, and it will have an effect. If you don't believe me, you can find someone else to test it out. I can only help you to this point." Only after hearing that did Shui Ruer put away the bottle without worry. She looked up at Jin Yu and asked with suspicion, "Why do you want to help me?" Jin Yu glanced at her. "My master likes Yun Luo Feng and wants to separate them. Otherwise, why do you think I went to Yi Qi? I already said my piece, whether you are willing to use this medicinal liquid is up to you." She was not as patient toward Shui Ruer as she was with Yi Qi. After saying everything necessary, she left the restaurant without any hesitation. Not long after Jin Yu walked out of the restaurant, she turned into an alley, and a small figure descended from the sky and landed in front of her. "Master," Jin Yu respectfully called while kneeling on the ground and cupping her fists. A young boy stood in front of her. He was very fair and adorable, but his face contained a bewitching and cold quality that did not match his age, and his dark eyes twinkled with an eerie light. "Why did you do that just now?" Bai Su slowly walked over to Jin Yu and raised his chin up, haughtily looking down at the kneeling woman. "Didn't you know that Yun Xiao is impervious to poison? Your immortantia poison is useless for him." Jin Yu replied with her head lowered, "This subordinate knows that. It's just, that little girl is too insolent and actually claimed that she wasn't inferior to Yun Luo Feng. If Yun Luo Feng was truly that lacking, you wouldn't want to marry her, master. This subordinate doesn't like other people questioning master's taste, so I acted on my own. Please pardon me, master." In the beginning, Jin Yu did not acknowledge Yun Luo Feng's excellence either, but she finally witnessed her growth over this past year. Her master would not woo her otherwise. Chapter 817, Shui Ruer is duped 4. "Forget it, I can forgive you for this matter, but you must not act on your own in the future." Bai Su extended his hand and lifted Jin Yu from the ground while saying, "Our hope to use the Yi family is already shattered. I can only recuperate for now." "Yes." Jin Yu looked up, her face resuming its usual icy look. Inside a private room of the restaurant, faced with a table full of dishes, Yi Qi did not have any appetite. She tiredly leaned against the back of the chair, and her head was drooping down. The door of the room was opened at that moment. When she saw Shui Ruer walking in, her eyes instantly brightened and she stood up. "Ruer, you are here." Shui Ruer walked toward Yi Qi with a faint smile that made her picturesque features bloom. "Qi, you must have waited for a while, right? I'm sorry, something suddenly came up, so I'm really late." "It's nothing." Yi Qi generously waved her hand in dismissal. "These dishes are a bit cold though. I will have a waiter heat it up later." "Right, Ruer, where did you go just now? Why do you have stalks of straw on you?" Yi Qi brushed away the straw on Shui Ruer's back with eyes full of curiosity, missing the panic in Shui Ruer's eyes. I don't know where I acquired it." Shui Ruer smoothed her expression and said with a smile, "It's late, let's eat first, then you should go home. Otherwise, Madame Yi will certainly get angry. I don't want your family's peace to be disturbed because of me." Shui Ruer looked down in sorrow, her face brimming with dejection. It was as though she was both happy about Yi Qi's family reunion and also sad that she could not stay friends with Yi Qi. Yi Qi originally wanted to grill Shui Ruer about whether she really had ulterior motives regarding Yun Xiao, but she was unable to say anything after seeing her like this. She was about to comfort Shui Ruer, but before she could say anything, a muscular man broke in and panted, "Ruoyer, some mishap happened at your house." "What did you say?" Shui Ruoyer blinked in confusion as she asked, "What mishap happened at my house?" "Ruoyer, your house was burned down, and your ill mother was buried in the flames." The strong man appeared as though he had to use all of his strength to utter those words. Shui Ruoyer's sight went dark, and her body fell back. "Ruoyer." Yi Qi caught Shui Ruoyer with agility, but her voice was trembling. "Why is it like this? Why did a fire start in Ruoyer's house for no reason?" While Yi Qi's eyes were filled with frantic, Shui Ruoyer opened her eyes and communicated with the man with her eyes. "I also don't know what happened." The man's eyes flickered as he said, "I heard the neighbors say that there was an 8 or 9-year-old little girl in red who kept loitering near Ruoyer's house. But I don't know whether the fire has anything to do with her." 8 or 9-year-old little girl in red. Could it be Huo? Yi Qi did not see the look that passed through the two of them, so the first person she thought of after hearing the man's words was Huo. It could not be helped that the little girl had a past record. "Qi." Shui Ruoyer tightly grabbed Yi Qi's hands as tears flowed down her face. "I believe in Huo, this matter definitely doesn't have anything to do with her. Although she fiercely beat me up back then, I don't believe that the girl is cruel to this extent and would commit arson and murder. The only pity is my old, bedridden mother leaving me like this." Chapter 818, I Won't Take This Blame 1. Shui Ruoyer covered her lips while sobbing sporadically, her eyes gleaming with tears. At first glance, her words might be exculpating Huo, but in truth, she was telling Yi Qi that the one who committed arson and murder was Huo. Since that girl could viciously beat her up prior to this, what else wouldn't she do? Fury burst into Yi Qi's heart, and she nearly rushed to seek retribution from Huo. However, just as the urge rose up in her, she suddenly recalled Yi Eximo's cold eyes, and it immediately cleared her head. "Ruoyer, come with me to the Yi residence, and I will ask whether she did this. Also, since you have nowhere else to go, I will beg foster mother to let you stay a few days." Shui Ruoyer froze and even forgot to keep crying. According to Yi Qi's personality, after hearing those words, shouldn't she immediately go to kill Huo in anger to avenge her? Why was she going to inquire about the truth of the matter still? No matter what though, she would be able to stay at the Yi residence tonight. As long as she stayed there, she would have a chance to obtain Yun Xiao. Once Yun Xiao fell in love with her, the command of Yi City would be in her hands. Compared to the dispute occurring in the outside world, the Yi residence appeared to be full of joy and harmony. However, at this time, a male servant walked in and hurriedly reported, "Master, Madam, Miss has returned, and Miss Shui is with her." While outside, everyone called Yi Jingchen, "Young Master," but the servants of the Yi residence all called him, "Master." Hearing that Shui Ruoyer came to the Yi residence again, Yi Jingchen and Jun Fengling both did not look too pleased. "I already said my home doesn't welcome that girl, why doesn't Qiqi listen?" Jun Fengling furrowed her brows. "Moreover, I told Qiqi to stay at home and reflect on her mistakes, who permitted her to go out?" "Madam, Miss said that Miss Shui's home was burned down, so she has nowhere else to live now." The servant reverently reported, "Also, Miss also said that she brought Miss Shui here to verify something." Jun Fengling's eyes darkened. "Let them come in, I would like to see what they came here to verify." As her foster daughter, Yi Qi typically did not need to be announced when she came to see her, but because she had Shui Ruoyer with her, she was stopped by the servants. In the face of all this, Yun Xiao remained expressionless and silently peeled off grape skin for Yun Luo Feng before lifting the translucent grape to her lips. Cough, cough, Jun Fengling dryly coughed before glaring at Yi Jingchen in reproach beside her. "Do you see how considerate and warm my son is? Why don't you learn from him?" Yi Jingchen chuckled and slipped his arm around Jun Fengling's shoulders. "If you wanted me to feed you grapes, you should have mentioned it sooner. When don't I satisfy your wishes?" Jun Fengling slapped his arm away and playfully protested, "Why do you need me to say these things? You doing it on your own and you doing it after a reminder from me are two completely different things. If you need me to remind you, then the action loses its meaning. I think you should learn from my son." Yi Jingchen coughed in embarrassment. Someone as old as him still needed to have a junior teach him how to woo a woman. However, if it could make Zhan Fengling smile, perhaps he could go learn a few tricks from him. If those old antiques from the Yi family learned of this though, they would probably harp on him about it for a long while. While Yi Jingchen contemplated this matter, Yi Qi and Shui Ruoer were already walking in from outside the door. The current Shui Ruoer was incredibly pale and appeared to have suffered an enormous blow and would collapse at any moment, as though a light breeze would knock her over. Chapter 819. I won't take this blame too. Chi-Chi, Zhan Fengling asked with a frown, you said you came to us to verify something, what is it? Yi Qi glanced at Hua, who was sitting at the table and eating an apple. Foster mother, Ruoer's house was burned down just now. According to witnesses, they saw Hua appear near there, so I came here to verify where Hua went half an hour ago. Hua took a bite of the apple and looked up at Yi Qi as she asked in a childish tone, are you saying that I set her house on fire? Yi Qi bit her lips. That's not what I meant. I only came to ask where you were during the time. Although that's not what you meant, you still suspect me of committing arson. Hua stood up with a cold smile and roughly tossed the remaining half of the apple at Shui Ruoer. Shui Ruoer was caught by surprise, and the apple forcefully slammed into her head, turning it red. Yi Qi was startled, not expecting Hua to directly act without a word. She did not even have a single explanation. Do you see this? Hua looked at Shui Ruoer and proudly lifted her chin. If I want to hit her, I'll hit her. If I want to kill her, I'll kill her. I never deny the things I do. But if you want me to take the blame for committing arson, I'm sorry, I won't take this blame. Yi Qi grew silent. This girl dared to hit Shui Ruoer in front of them, so if she was really the one who set the fire, she probably would not deny it. Since she was not admitting to it, did it mean that the true culprit was not her? Chi-Chi, Shui Ruoer came back to her senses, and looked at Yi Qi with tearful eyes while massaging her aching head. I already said that she wasn't the arsonist. You should have believed me and shouldn't have come here to ask about this. Yi Qi was clearly sticking up for her, but when she said it, it became nosily meddling in other people's business. Zhan Fengling's eyes darkened. She had lived for a long time and schemed against many other people, so how could she not hear the deeper meaning behind Shui Ruoer's words? Since we already proved that Hua wasn't the one who set the fire, we don't have anything else. Zhan Fengling turned her head away from Shui Ruoer. I know you don't have anywhere else to go recently, but I don't have any spare rooms for you in the Yi residence, you should go find lodging at some inn instead. Shui Ruoer's expression shifted. The Yi residence was giant, so how could it not have any spare rooms? Zhan Fengling simply did not want her to stay. Madam, Shui Ruoer hurriedly kneeled down and kowtowed, her head loudly banging against the ground, I beg you to take me in. I won't stay here for too long, just a few nights at most. I guarantee that I won't cause any trouble for Madam or spy on young Master Xiao. After kowtowing to her, she hastily crawled over to young Luo Feng with a pitiful expression. Miss Yun, I know you have some misunderstandings about me, but I swear that I truly never had any ulterior motives toward young Master Xiao. I beg you to let me stay a few days. I'm willing to be your maidservant and serve you. I will let you run satisfied a little more. After I successfully obtain Yun Xiao's good graces, I will make you pay for today's events. Shui Ruoer cast her gaze downward, a malicious light flashing through her eyes. Foster mother. Yi Qi could not steel her heart to this and was about to speak on Shui Ruoer's behalf when Zhan Fengling's cold voice halted her. Enough. Not letting you stay is my idea. Don't harass my daughter-in-law. If you insist on being like this, don't blame me for being rude. Her palm slammed down on the table, splitting it in half in an instant, and it fell on the ground. Chapter 820. The Death of Shui Ruoer 1. Shui Ruoer was frightened by the power in Zhan Fengling's slam. Her misty eyes were full of confusion and incomprehension as she looked at Zhan Fengling. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were natural enemies because they loved the same man. In the past, her mother and grandmother fought over the same man every night, to the point of being kicked out by her father's clan in the end. If her father's clan did not know she had a chance to marry into the Yi family, they would not agree to re-accept her into the genealogical record. So, it was her first time seeing a mother-in-law as protective of her daughter-in-law as Zhan Fengling. The thing that crushed her heart was that the one who was being protected was not her. Shui Ruoer subconsciously bit her lips, and her long eyelashes hid the malice in her eyes. It took a while for her to calm her emotions and look up pitifully while saying in a quiet voice, "Apologies, I've been a hassle. Someone with my family background is hard for other people to accept to begin with. Don't worry, I won't bother the Yi family from now on and won't appear in front of Xiao Qi either." After saying that, Shui Ruer shot one final glance at Yi Qi, her eyes full of conflict and reluctance, before turning around and walking out of the main hall. "Ruer," Yi Qi hastily shouted, her eyes brimming with anxiety. But she knew that foster mother did not like Shui Ruer, so she did not dare to plead for her. "Wait." Suddenly, a wicked voice was heard, making Shui Ruer stop moving. "Fenger." Zhen Fengling glanced at young Luo Feng with confusion. "Do you have something else to say?" "Mother, I'm born protective. Since I consider Huo as one of my own, I absolutely won't permit anyone to slander her." Young Luo Feng narrowed her eyes, an evil light flashing past. So since she stepped into the Yi residence, she shouldn't think about leaving. Shui Ruer's body froze before turning around to face young Luo Feng, her face pale. What do you mean? I was inside a restaurant back then. Xiao Qi can testify for me that it was only because someone came to inform me that I learned about what happened at my house. Moreover, it was also other people who saw someone who looked like Huo appear near my house. I believed her from the start." Yi Qi nodded and added in agreement, "Ruer spoke the truth. I can verify that she didn't know about this beforehand." "Xiao Qi," Zhen Fengling shouted at Yi Qi in warning as her brows furrowed, then she looked at young Luo Feng. "Fenger, you did the right thing. Huo can't be wrongly accused without a good cause. So I support your endeavor." Young Luo Feng's lips turned up with an evil smile. "Since it's like that, I'll allow Shui Ruer to stay at the Yi residence as she wishes. Before that, I will send someone to investigate the truth of the matter." In other words, Shui Ruer was under house arrest inside the Yi residence, and she would only be released after young Luo Feng discovers the true arsonist. However, only Shui Ruer knew the truth of the matter. She spoke with downcast eyes. "I didn't wrongly accuse Huo. I only came to ask about it because of the witness's description. Perhaps that person merely has a similar appearance to Huo. However, since you all suspect me, I will stay. I believe Madame Yi will prove my innocence and won't allow certain people to deliberately frame me." Zhen Fengling's expression darkened. This girl was so shameless even now. Her words actually implied that young Luo Feng was framing her. Chapter 821. The Death of Shui Ruer 2. Just as Zhen Fengling wanted to stand up for young Luo Feng, a cold voice suddenly rung, "As my wife, even if she wrongly accuses you, you can only admit to it." The man's handsome face was as frigid and expressionless as always, and his eyes, as dark as night, icily stared at Shui Ruer, freezing her in place and making her feel like a countless number of knives were cutting her. His voice was as cold-hearted as usual. "Besides, I don't think you have anything that would cause her to falsely accuse you." Shui Ruer's face turned paler, and her body swayed a few times, nearly falling down. What enraged her more was that Yi Qi did not speak up for her at a time like this and simply allowed these people to bully her as they wished. Yi Qi sensed Shui Ruer's pleading gaze, and unconsciously lowered her head, abashed. If it was Yi Eximo, she would argue strongly for what was right in favor of Shui Ruer, but she did not have the courage to oppose Yi Jingchen and Zhen Fengling. Because her foster parents were who she respected the most. She already rebelliously went against their wishes, how could she continue to speak in support of Ruer? She could only wait until this matter was over to console Ruer. "Brother Yi," Zhen Fengling did not bother to look at Shui Ruer before turning to Yi Jingchen, "send 2 people to watch over her. I don't wish for this woman to cause any more trouble in the Yi residence. Moreover, lock her up somewhere farther away from shower. Don't allow her to stay here and repulse people." Zhen Fengling clearly did not want Shui Ruer to have a chance to get near Yun Xiao. Even if Yun Xiao would not like her, she would still find it repulsive. Yi Jingchen gently smiled. Shortly after, he harshly shouted, "Guards! Escort Shui Ruer away, and keep her under custody. She's not allowed to appear in the main court." Almost immediately, 2 guards walked inside and respectfully cupped their fists in salute, saying, "As you order." Seeing the 2 guards grabbing a hold of Shui Ruer, Yi Qi hurriedly held her hand and quietly comforted, "Ruer, don't worry, if it really wasn't you who set the house on fire, my foster mother will certainly clear your name. We will have to mistreat you a few days for now." Shui Ruer miserably smiled, but she did not respond to Yi Qi and followed the two guards outside. Yi Qi did not notice the sinister light that flashed through her eyes in the blink of an eye. Instead, she was still terribly worried about her situation. Qi, why don't you go and rest? Zhang Fengling's voice did not have its initial indifference anymore and carried a trace of helplessness instead. If Shui Ruer truly falsely accused Huo, I won't easily let her off. Mentally prepare yourself. Yi Qi jolted and turned to face Zhang Fengling. Foster mother, if she really did that, then I can't forgive her either. However, I believe in her. Not only because she's my friend, but because her mother was also buried in this fire. She couldn't have used her mother's life to frame other people, right? She knew that they must have misunderstood Huo this time. However, this misunderstanding was not Ruer's intention, she was ignorant too. In a world this big, there must be some people who are self-centered and don't care about their family at all. Zhang Fengling's tone gradually became more aloof. Perhaps you will understand it one day. Now though, retreat first and thoroughly reflect on your behavior over the past few days. Yes, Yi Qi bowed before leaving. After the two people left, the atmosphere inside the main hall was still unable to recover its previous joy and harmony. Chapter 822, The Death of Shui Ruer 3. Zhang Fengling's lips dawned on a smile as she turned to look at young Luo Feng. You two are also tired, aren't you? Go back and rest well. I will have a maidservant go and call you when it's dinner time. While saying this, Zhang Fengling kept making eyes at Yun Xiao. She did not forget to order, go and properly make a child. Some embarrassment appeared on Yun Luofeng's face. Although she slept in the same bed as Yun Xiao for so many days, nothing actually happened. So it was impossible for them to make a child. However, to Zhang Fengling's request, Yun Xiao coolly responded, all right. All right. Yun Luofeng's face darkened. Yun Xiao. The usually obedient Yun Xiao did not go along with Yun Luofeng this time though. His cold features were filled with determination as he said, we'll quickly procreate. No, don't be too quick, it's better to be slower for this type of thing, Zhang Fengling retorted with a nefarious smile. Yun Xiao was startled and cast a glance at Yun Luofeng in confusion, as though asking her the meaning behind Zhang Fengling's words. Yun Luofeng's face grew darker. She did not expect Zhang Fengling would be this dirty. I won't disturb you then, haha. Zhang Fengling's emotions could not help but brighten after seeing Yun Luofeng's dark look, and she said, Brother Yi, let's go. We will also return to our room to rest a little. But when she walked past Yun Xiao, she paused briefly and her smile grew bigger. Son, work hard, mother is waiting to hold a grandson. Then, Yi Jingchen and she walked outside the main hall hand in hand, leaving the space for the two of them. Seeing how the main hall emptied, Yun Luofeng took a few steps toward Yun Xiao with an evil smile. You want to know what your mother's words meant? Yun Xiao honestly nodded, he really wanted to know. Your mother meant, Yun Luofeng's lips neared Yun Xiao, her dark eyes glittering with a wicked light, when you were in bed. Last longer. Yun Xiao watched her as he stated with a rough voice, no matter how my power advanced during these past years, I never gave up on training my physique. What did this have to do with lasting longer? Training my physique means that my stamina is also greater, Yun Xiao briefly paused, so you can rest assured. Yun Luofeng chuckled, her hand extending into the folds of Yun Xiao's clothing, her fingers slowly tracing the man's abs. It is true that I was attracted by your abs ever since I saw you that first time. If she did not strip away Yun Xiao's clothing, it was hard to imagine that he would have these 8-pack abs. After all, the muscles on his body are not apparent from the exterior. To use a common saying to describe him, he appears thin when clothed and beefy when naked, the perfect golden standard figure. No, this guy's physique was an even higher level than a golden standard figure. It looks like I will need to think of a way to break through to God level faster. Yun Luofeng muttered to herself as she retracted her hand and lightly stroked her chin. It was the deep of night. Inside the woodshed, Shui Ruer stood up from the ground littered with firewood and slapped the dust from her body before walking towards the door. However, the door was locked shut by a chain, so she was unable to open it from the inside. Her expression could not help but darken as a vicious glint, akin to a poisonous dagger, flickered through the bottom of her eyes. Jun Fengling, I didn't expect you to guard against me to this degree. Wait until I have enticed your son. Even if you don't want to accept me then, you must accept me anyways once your son is in love with me. Chapter 823, The Death of Shui Ruer 4. Shui Ruer inwardly snorted. While Jun Fengling was separated from her son all these years, she felt very guilty toward him in her heart and wanted to make it up to him. Otherwise, why else would she indulge young Luo Feng this much? If I became Jun Fengling's daughter-in-law, she could do nothing but pander to her as well. Otherwise, how could her son easily forgive her for abandoning him for all those years? It was laughable that Shui Ruer simply did not understand Jun Fengling's indulgence toward young Luo Feng was not done out of guilt for Yun Xiao. She did have guilt, but she did not indulge Yun Luo Feng because of that. The true reason she accepted Yun Luo Feng originated from Yun Luo Feng herself. Otherwise, with her personality, even if Jun Fengling reluctantly accepted her daughter-in-law due to her son, she still would not protect her without reservations like that. The mere fact that Jun Fengling gave her most treasured item to Yun Luo Feng was an indication that she liked this daughter-in-law from the bottom of her heart. Some of her affection for Yun Luo Feng was due to her son, but more of it was due to her own charm. Shui Ruer looked up, and the ice in her eyes slowly disappeared, replaced by a pitiful expression. Brother guards, I want to go out to relieve myself. Can you please let me leave for a moment? Outside the woodshed, the two guards looked at each other with perplexion. Soon after, one of the guards coldly said, Madam ordered us to not allow you to take a single step outside the woodshed. If you want to relieve yourself, do it in there. Shui Ruer's eyes flicked as she continued softly saying, but there isn't a chamber pot inside this shed. If brothers aren't willing to let me leave, can you bring me a chamber pot? The two guards hesitated for a moment before agreeing, all right, wait a moment. Shui Ruer's ability was not that great and could not escape from them, so they did not have any suspicion and went to prepare a chamber pot for her. Hearing the sound of footsteps gradually walking farther away, a sinister smile appeared on her face. Then, she took out the Amortentia poison given to her by Jin Yu and trickled a drop on her body. This poison was colorless and tasteless, so normal people could not sense it at all. Not long after, the sound of the chains unlocking could be heard from outside, and the two door guards walked in from the outside, blocking the entryway like a statue. Here's your chamber pot, the guard coldly said as he placed the pot on the ground. Thank you, brothers. Shui Ruer peered up with a delicate and gentle smile. Her voice was very soft, akin to a claw grazing their heart. The two guards were normally calm people, but when Shui Ruer sent them a look, their heart nearly jumped out of their chest for reasons unknown. This was their first time discovering how dainty and charming Shui Ruer could appear. Cough cough, one of the guards dryly coughed and wanted to suppress his pounding heart. Unfortunately, his eyes kept stealing glances at Shui Ruer every now and then with shyness on his face. Seeing the Amortentia poison taking effect, Shui Ruer turned joyful. Her face showed no sign of it though and remained pitiful. Brothers, I am awfully bored in this shed and want to take a walk, can I? I guarantee I won't leave the Yi residence. This. The two guards looked at each other, their eyes full of struggle. Madam ordered that you're not allowed to leave. Shui Ruer hurriedly raised two fingers and swore, I swear that I won't head to the main court and won't leave the Yi residence. I just want to have some quiet time by myself. Please help me, brothers. Chapter 824, The Death of Shui Ruer 5. Shui Ruer had one of the guard's sleeve clasped in her fingers as she imploringly looked at him. At that moment, in the eyes of the two guards, Shui Ruer was like an embodiment of the sun, the burnished ray around her touching and resonating with their souls. So how could they bear to deny her request? You must hurry and come back. We'll keep this door locked and pretend you are still inside the woodshed. I will also tell you some of the locations that the patrol passes by. You must remember to go around those places. If Madam learns of this, we will all die. Ecstasy rushed into Shui Ruer's heart, and she hurried said, Thank you, brothers. I, Shui Ruer, absolutely won't forgive your kindness. After saying, she hastily walked out of the shed and surveyed her surroundings. After seeing no one else around, she swiftly walked towards the main court. Inside the room, the scent of incense wafted through the room. Young Luo Feng, who was originally sitting in a meditation posture with her eyes closed, opened her eyes and caught sight of Yuan Xiao about to leave the room. Yuan Xiao, where are you going? Yuan Xiao halted his steps, his frigid lips slowly turning up in a faint curve. You ate too little during dinner, perhaps because you didn't like the cooks in the Yi residence, so I wanted to prepare a midnight snack for you. Back then, after tasting Yuan Xiao's cooking at the Lujing Kingdom, when young Luo Feng returned to the Longyuan Kingdom, she wanted to have Yi Ling transfer the chef from his estate to her estate. It was a surprise when Qingyan told her the one who made those delicious dishes that day was Yuan Xiao. It was only then that she learned of Yuan Xiao's culinary talent. Alright, I'll wait for you to come back, young Luo Feng said with a faint smile. Yuan Xiao pushed open the door and walked out. The night was increasingly silent, but as the night breeze swept over the surroundings, the sound of leaves rustling could still be heard. At present, Yuan Xiao was solely focused on young Luo Feng's midnight snack, so he did not see the woman stumbling toward him from the front. It was unknown whether the woman did it on purpose, but even though she clearly saw Yuan Xiao walking over, she did not dodge and ran into him instead. When Yuan Xiao discovered the woman about to knock into him, she was already in front of her, and it was too late for him to avoid her. Hence, he decisively acted. Get lost. The man's voice was cold and callous, and his aura erupted from his body, instantly sending the woman's delicate figure flying away and landing on the ground in an extremely battered state. Shui Ruer never expected someone as good-looking as Yuan Xiao to be so rough. Normally, if a beautiful woman fell in front of a man, shouldn't he catch her? However, not only did he not catch her, he even struck her. It was as though she was some bacteria and he would be tarnished if she tainted him. Thinking to hear, Shui Ruer climbed up from the ground with tearful eyes and pathetically looked at Yuan Xiao. Young Master Xiao, I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I simply didn't see you appear just now. Her appearance was delicately beautiful, and her expression was soft and gentle. Her tearful appearance made an urge to protect her uncontrollably arise in people's heart. This type of woman would be desired by many men. However, Yuan Xiao was not one of them. Young Master Xiao, in truth, I have liked you since I first saw you, Shui Ruer adoringly said. I'm different from young Luo Feng. She must have only gotten close to you because she knew your identity, but my love for you has no ulterior motives. Even if you weren't a member of the Yi family, I would still deeply love you. Chapter 825, The Death of Shui Ruer 6. Yuan Xiao was about to leave, but his footsteps halted upon hearing Shui Ruer mention young Luo Feng's name. His cold eyes slowly turned to her. Seeing him walk toward her, Shui Ruer thought he was successfully bewitched by the immortantia poison. Joy entered her heart, and the expression on her face grew softer. Young Master Xiao, if you're willing to marry me, you will learn that I'm not inferior to young Luo Feng. I will only be more outstanding than her. She was gently smiling as she slowly walked toward Yuan Xiao. With every step that brought her closer to Yuan Xiao, her heartbeat would increase a beat. She was foolishly staring at his cold face, which unwittingly took her breath away once more, and she harshly swallowed. If she became Yuan Xiao's wife, how happy and blessed will her life be? Young Master Xiao, my leg is a bit weak, can you lend me a hand? Shui Ruer softly smiled, her arm extending toward Yuan Xiao as her body also fell into the man's embrace. However, just as her hand was around to make contact with Yuan Xiao's wrist, the sharp glint of a sword suddenly flashed. In the blink of an eye, her hand, which did not touch Yuan Xiao yet, was chopped off. Ah! An anguished cry resounded in the air, shaking the entire Yi residence. At the same time, Shui Ruer's falling body did not have any support and heavily fell on the ground. Fresh blood spurted from her cut arm, dyeing the entire courtyard red. You weren't affected. Shui Ruer's eyes were wide open, and her ashen lips started to tremble. How was it possible? She already tested the immortantia poison that woman gave her several times. It succeeded every time, so why wasn't this man bewitched by her? Why? Why was it like this? What happened? Just as Shui Ruer was about to faint, an astonished voice was heard from behind. Closely following, a group of people with Yi Jingchen and his wife as the leaders all walked inside the courtyard. There was even a group of guards surrounding the entire courtyard. Young Luo Feng swiftly strode to Yun Xiao's side and swept her eyes across Shui Ruer, who was laying in a puddle of blood. She instantly understood what occurred here. Ruer. Yi Qi caught sight of Shui Ruer as well and shouted in surprise before hurriedly walking to her side. Ruer, your hand, what happened? Due to an excess loss of blood, Shui Ruer was incredibly pale. She looked at Yun Xiao with trembling lips. Shui Ruer, Zhun Fengling already recovered her wits and walked to Shui Ruer with a cold smile. Didn't I already say that you aren't allowed to take a single step out of the woodshed? You also aren't permitted to appear inside the main court. It looks like some people disobeyed my orders and released you. Yi Jingchen understood Zhun Fengling's words and immediately sent 2 people to bring the 2 guards charged with watching over Shui Ruer. After all, Shui Ruer's appearance here certainly did not escape connections with them. Foster mother, Ruer is already like this. Shouldn't we treat her first? Yi Qi nervously rubbed her sleeves, tears nearly dropping down. Chi-Chi, it's none of your business here. Zhun Fengling glanced at Yi Qi. If you want to stay here and watch the development of this situation, then shut up. Otherwise, I'll have to send you away immediately. Yi Qi was briefly taken back and kept quiet. She never dared to disobey Zhun Fengling's orders. Zhun Fengling did not grace Shui Ruer and Yi Qi with another look and looked at Yun Xiao. Shower, tell mother what happened. Mother will certainly give justice to Fenger and you.